Let's talk about how, for you guys, when you initially came to New York, and then initially sort of had your what you regard, looking back, as that first Broadway break. I know this is your first on Broadway, Chris. So we'll come back in a moment. But I guess let's start with Andy this time. What brought you out here first, and that first sort of break before the early break, I should say.
I mean, after I caught the bug in high school, I just continued on with it and then found professional theater in Baltimore, where I'm from. Worked at a place called Toby's Dinner Theater, where actually my co-star works as well,
Really?
Margot Cyber. She had worked at the same theater that I had. And that was 8 shows a week, but we were also waiting tables, so I was serving slinging a lot of drinks and stuff like that and making some money. But at that point, I was so ingrained into doing theater that I was like, at 20, I think it was 20, I said, I'm gonna give it a shot. So like $3,000 in my pocket and moved up here and shared a place with a friend and just started auditioning, reading Backstage magazine and finding all those auditions for theater, and worked regionally, and then finally my first Broadway break was Saturday Night Fever. So I keep doing these movie musicals, which is really interesting. And but it was also the place where I met my wife as well. So that was 13 years ago. So a lot of stuff happened all at once.
Yeah.
And from then on, I just sort of understood that, Broadway is actually no different than doing those shows back in Baltimore, and except you had to wash your own clothes and sew your own holes and anything that broke, and buy your own makeup. Now it's, everybody gives me that stuff. And sews my costumes for me, and that's the perks.
That's a big perk.
So it's no different. It's just a matter of how much passion you're going to put in it. So I've dedicated myself to this Broadway stuff, and now I got a big old lead, and I'm trying to champion a show as best I can.
Absolutely. Tony, when did you first sort of arrive on the scene here, and what was your big break?
Well, I've been working in a repertory theater, regional theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Right out of drama school, I went there, the American Repertory Theater, and I was really only going to stay 1 season, I think, and that turned into 4 seasons. It was a great place to grow and to work, and still thriving. And so I came to New York after 4 seasons to try my luck. And it was just one of those crazy things. I had, I think it was my second audition in town, and that was for Neil Simon's female version of The Odd Couple. And there's 2 male roles, the counterparts to the Pigeon sisters in the original. And I auditioned, and I was called back to the callback was odd because Neil had thrown his back out or something. He wasn't at the first audition, and I had to go to his hotel room. It sounds like a casting couch. It's really much more benign than that, but he was sort of like, going to propped up on his thing, and I literally was standing at the foot of the bed in this hotel room doing this audition, and I was fortunate enough to get it, and it was actually a pre-Broadway tour, and then we came into the city, and it was a great break.
And for Neil, it's been, I guess, obviously you had a child acting career, but when did New York sort of first enter the picture for you?
The first thing I'd ever done randomly was co-starring opposite Whoopi Goldberg in a movie called Clara's Heart. And the circumstances through there were its own story, but I ended up meeting Whoopi. Whoopi played for me in Baltimore, Maryland, the CD of a musical called Phantom of the Opera, which was playing in London. And I had never heard of anything like this. And when that movie finished, part of their shoot was in Jamaica. And so they all got to go to Jamaica, and I wasn't in those scenes. So the producer, because he felt bad that everyone else got to go to Jamaica, flew my family to New York City to see a Broadway show and to hang out there for 3 days. We'd never been from New Mexico. Wow. And so we were there in New York, and it was fantastic. And Les Miserables was a show that I had grown very fond to because Braden Danner, an actor who was Gavroche in the original Broadway company of Les Mis, was originally cast in this movie opposite Whoopi Goldberg. So I auditioned, I didn't get the movie. Braden Danner got it. Of course, he was Gavroche in Les Miserables. Because of that, I felt kinship with him, and I listened to the show, and I really loved it. So we went to New York, and we ended up seeing Les Miserables, and I remember very, very vividly because I'm from real small town New Mexico, where theater is done in gyms or at the country club. There was no like Ruidoso theater. And I remember sitting in the back row of the orchestra with my family and watching Les Miserables, and it was so grand and so epic with the turntable and the fog and the barricade and the flags. And I remember the end of Act One, One Day More, and everyone's marching forward and back, and it's just, I still get goosebumps from it. But my jaw was literally wide open as the house lights came up from intermission. I remember being in the back row going, actually closing my mouth. And I just had no idea that it could be like that. And so from that point on, I was super hooked into buying CD cast albums that had the little libretto booklet with pictures from the cast, and I would learn all the songs. So from Les Mis on, I would come every year. Then I was doing Doogie Howser, which was that TV show, and so that gave me the financial ability to come out a couple times a year and see 15 shows in 12 days. So I did all this, the City of Angels and the Romance and the Into the Woods, and so that was just what I listened to all the time. So from that point forward, I held Broadway as this massive standard with which I would one day get to do.
Mm-hmm. James, you're sort of from the area, right, originally?
No, actually, I'm from San Francisco Bay Area, in Hayward, California, actually, and I got a wonderful break when I was in college. I was working at Cal State Hayward, working in the bookstore, and this lady, I was a theater major, I was on my senior year, and the lady said, hey, they're doing an audition in San Francisco for Showboat, Ragtime, and Phantom. And being a young, immature African-American actor, I just knew I wasn't going to be in that slave show. So I'm going to audition for Ragtime and Phantom because that's where I need to be. And of course, the theater guys had a completely different other way of going. And I auditioned and got a call back for Showboat. And I had just auditioned for Ain't Misbehavin' at this smaller theater in Oakland. And I told my mom, I said, I don't know if I'm gonna take that slave show, because I gotta do this other thing, for myself. And she was like, if you don't take that big old paycheck they're gonna give you on that tour. And I went on tour and I got the education of a lifetime. The guys who, all the stevedores who sing Old Man River with Joe, those guys took me under their wing and they said, when you get to New York, you'll be ready, but we're gonna help you. And I remember one of the guys in the cast was a former teacher at one of this big school. And he brought all these plays and he goes, did you read this? I was like, no. He goes, well, read all these before the end of the tour. And so I had to read like Night Mother and all these different plays that he had. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I didn't go back to New York. I went back to the Bay Area and I spent 8 years in the regional area, just doing all the shows there, Theater Works, American Musical Theater, all the Willows Theater, all these different places just to kind of get my bearings. And all these New York actors, they always flew New York actors in, regionally. So and they were like, why aren't you in New York? I'm like, I'm not ready yet. Like, why aren't you? So finally, I did this show called Memphis in 2004 at Theater Works, before it became Memphis that it is now. And I met all of my friends, and one of the guys happened to be going into the new show Spelling Bee. And it did really well on Broadway, and when they were trying to find a San Francisco cast, I didn't have an agent at the time. He said, talk to my friend James. So they came down, they auditioned me, I got the part. They flew me up to New York, I had to audition for James Lapine, and I was scared as I don't know what, and I got the role. So we got to do it in San Francisco, Boston, and they told us, hey, by the way, you're gonna be the replacement cast for Broadway. Wow. And that's how I came here, literally as, the sit-down cast from San Francisco, Boston. They brought our entire cast to New York, and that's how I got here.
And Jefferson, was it sort of what was your way in?
To New York?
New York, and then Broadway.
I graduated from college and came right to New York and got a sublet in Hell's Kitchen, and I was going to assail the industry. I'm glad I didn't. I think I would have just been a miserable failure and been chewed up and spat out. I fell into a place in drama school. A friend of mine was out there, said, a vacancy has opened up in the program, why don't you be in it? And I said, fine, the head of the department would like to see you first, audition you. And it was very similar to yours. I went to the Empire Hotel at about 11 o'clock in the morning and met the head of the department wearing nothing but a pajama top. And he'd just come in on the red eye, and I thought, oh, is this the way it's going to be? And he sat in the closet, because there was no room. And I think I did Iago, and I remember being in the corner trying to do Iago, and I touched the television set. And I just remember looking at it and going, because it was an anachronism. It didn't exist in Shakespeare's time. But anyway, I got into drama school, so very fortunate, got to do lots of plays, and came in to the city again, and then proceeded to go out of the city and worked regionally in Baltimore for years and years at Center Stage and all over the country, La Jolla Playhouse. But I love that. That's where I grew, I think, as an actor, being able to play monster roles, you know, in these wonderful regional theaters. And I think that's where I received such a wonderful education. And didn't make my Broadway debut until the tender age of 30, I think, in I Am My Own Wife, where I played a gay East German transvestite. in I Am My Own Wife, utterly alone on stage, of course. So that was my...
That was just magnificent.
Oh, thank you. It's a great adventure.